The rain battered the windows of the sprawling Connecticut mansion, a relentless drumbeat that matched the tension in the air. Eleanor Brooks stood in the grand foyer, her modest coat dripping onto the marble floor, clutching a worn leather satchel. At 32, she was no stranger to tough gigs, but this one felt different. The agency had warned her, Mr. Harrington is particular. His son is challenging. Eleanor had nodded, unfazed. She'd handled challenging before. But as she waited, the weight of the house, its towering ceilings, its cold elegance, pressed down on her. A sharp voice cut through the silence. "You're late." Eleanor turned to see Victor Harrington, all sharp angles and sharper eyes, descending the spiral staircase. His tailored suit screamed wealth, but his scowl spoke of something heavier. She glanced at her watch, 5 minutes past noon. The train had been delayed, but she didn't argue. "My apologies, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice steady but warm. "I'm Eleanor Brooks, the new nanny." He didn't offer a handshake. "I expect punctuality. My son, Julian, requires structure. He's difficult. Autistic, they say. Nonverbal, prone to tantrums. The last nanny quit after a week." His tone was clipped, as if reciting a report. "You'll follow the schedule. Meals at 8, noon, and 6. Therapy sessions at 10 and 2. No deviations." Eleanor nodded, but her eyes caught on a small figure peering from behind a velvet curtain. A boy, maybe 7, with tousled dark hair and wide, curious eyes. Julian. He didn't look difficult. He looked lonely. Eleanor's first week was a trial by fire. Julian didn't speak, but his screams could fill the house. He'd fling toys, knock over chairs, or bolt to the garden, barefoot in the mud. Victor's instructions were clear: stick to the schedule, enforce discipline, keep emotions out of it. But Eleanor wasn't wired that way. She'd grown up in a small Ohio town, raised by a single mother who taught her that love was the answer to most things, even when it hurt. One rainy afternoon, Julian bolted again, this time to the greenhouse. Eleanor found him crouched among the ferns, rocking back and forth, his hands pressed to his ears. The schedule demanded they return for speech therapy, but Eleanor hesitated. She sat cross-legged on the damp floor, a safe distance away, and began humming softly, a lullaby her mother used to sing. Julian's rocking slowed. His eyes flicked toward her, wary but intrigued. "Hi, buddy," she whispered. "You like it out here, huh?" "Me too." No response, but he didn't run. Progress. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor chipped away at the walls around Julian. She noticed how he'd trace patterns in the dirt, how his fingers danced over piano keys when he thought no one was watching. The doctors had labeled him autistic, and Victor clung to that diagnosis like a lifeline, scheduling endless therapies to fix him. But Eleanor saw something else, a boy starved for connection, not correction. She started small. Instead of forcing him into rigid routines, she let him lead. If he wanted to spend an hour arranging pebbles in the garden, she joined him. If he banged on the piano, she played a soft melody alongside. Victor disapproved, his icy glares a constant reminder of her place. "You're here to follow orders, not play games," he snapped one evening, catching her and Julian laughing over a pile of leaves. "I'm here to help your son," Eleanor replied, her voice firm but kind. "He's not a checklist." Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't fire her. Not yet. The turning point came 3 months in. Eleanor had taken Julian to the local library, a rare outing Victor had reluctantly approved. Julian, usually restless in public, was transfixed by a book of constellations. He traced the stars with his finger, his face alight with wonder. Eleanor sat beside him, reading softly, when a librarian approached. "He's autistic, right?" the woman asked, not unkindly. "My nephew's the same. Doesn't talk much, but he's a genius with patterns." Eleanor smiled politely, but felt a pang. The label again. It followed Julian everywhere, defining him before he had a chance to define himself. That night, as she tucked him into bed, she whispered, "You're more than what they say, Julian. You're you." He didn't respond, but his hand brushed hers, a fleeting, deliberate touch. The next morning, Eleanor found Victor in his study, a fortress of mahogany and leather. She took a deep breath. "Sir, I need to say something. I don't think Julian's autistic. I think he's hurting. He needs love, not just schedules and therapies." Victor's pen froze mid-signature. "You're not a doctor," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're a nanny. You don't get to question his diagnosis." "I'm not questioning the doctors," Eleanor said, holding her ground. "I'm questioning what he needs. He's responding to kindness, to attention. He's not broken. He's just a boy who's been left alone too long." The room went silent. Victor's face was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something guilt, maybe, or pain. "You're out of line," he said finally. "One more misstep, and you're gone." Eleanor nodded, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Not for Julian. The truth about Victor unraveled slowly. Eleanor overheard snippets from the staff: a wife who'd died in childbirth, a man who'd buried his grief in work, a son he barely knew how to love. Victor wasn't cruel, just broken, hiding behind control because it was all he had left. Eleanor saw it in the way he watched Julian from a distance, his hands clenched, as if wanting to reach out but not knowing how. One evening, a storm knocked out the power. Julian, terrified of the dark, wailed in his room. Victor was away on business, and the staff were scrambling to fix the generator. Eleanor found Julian curled under his bed, trembling. She crawled in beside him, her flashlight casting soft shadows. "It's okay, buddy," she whispered. "I'm here." She told him stories, silly ones about talking squirrels and brave little boys who chased stars. Slowly, his sobs quieted. Then, in a voice so soft it was barely audible, he spoke. "Star." Eleanor froze. It was the first word he'd ever said to her. Tears stung her eyes as she hugged him close. "Yeah, Star. You're my little star." When Victor returned the next day, Eleanor couldn't contain herself. He spoke. "Mr. Harrington." Julian said, "Star. He's in there, waiting for us to reach him." Victor's face was a storm of emotions: disbelief, hope, fear. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." For the first time, he didn't argue. He followed her to the greenhouse, where Julian was arranging pebbles in a spiral. Victor hesitated, then knelt beside him. "Hey, champ," he said, his voice unsteady. "Show me what you're making." Julian didn't look up, but he pushed a pebble toward his father. A tiny gesture, but it was enough. Victor's eyes glistened, and Eleanor quietly stepped back, giving them space. The climax came unexpectedly. Victor had invited a specialist to reassess Julian, spurred by Eleanor's insistence. The doctor, a kind woman with a gentle demeanor, spent hours with Julian, observing him in the greenhouse, the library, the piano room. Her conclusion was careful but clear. Julian showed some autistic traits, but his behaviors were more consistent with emotional withdrawal than a definitive diagnosis. "He's responding to connection," she said. "Keep giving him that, and he'll keep opening up." Victor looked shaken. That night, he found Eleanor in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You were right," he said quietly. I didn't want to see it. I thought structure would fix him. I thought I was doing enough." Eleanor set her mug down. "You love him. That's enough to start with." He shook his head. "I haven't been a father. I've been a manager. I don't know how to do this." "You're already doing it," she said. "You're here." The months that followed were a slow, beautiful unraveling. Victor took time off work, joining Julian in the greenhouse, learning his son's quiet language of pebbles and piano notes. Eleanor stayed, guiding them both, her warmth a bridge between father and son. Julian's words came slowly, single syllables at first, then phrases, each one a small victory. One spring day, as cherry blossoms bloomed outside, Julian tugged Eleanor's hand and led her to the piano. He played a halting, imperfect melody, then looked at her and said, "Love." Eleanor's heart broke and mended in the same breath. She glanced at Victor, who stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. "Yeah, buddy," he said, his voice thick. "Love." Eleanor knew then that her work was done. She'd come to help a boy, but she'd helped a family find each other. As she packed her satchel that summer, Victor stopped her at the door. "You changed everything," he said. "How do we thank you?" She smiled, glancing at Julian, who was chasing a butterfly in the garden. "Just keep loving him. That's enough." As she walked down the driveway, the sun warm on her shoulders, Eleanor felt a quiet pride. She'd dared to see a boy not as a problem, but as a person. And in doing so, she'd reminded a father, and herself, of the power of humanity, one small act of kindness at a time. The story stretched across seasons, a tapestry of small moments that built to something profound. Eleanor's journey wasn't just about Julian or Victor. It was about the courage to challenge assumptions, to choose love over labels, to believe in the possibility of change. It resonated because it was universal, a reminder that even in the grandest houses or the humblest hearts, kindness could rewrite the story. And somewhere, in a Connecticut garden, a boy named Julian chased butterflies, his laughter a melody that needed no words.